Alright friends, welcome back to first capsule of 31st week. This is on TAP licensing, and you may ask what is meant by on TAP licensing. That means the organization, whoever want to become universal bank can apply anytime. This is opposite of stop and go licensing. Stop and go licensing means the firms need to apply as and when RBI opens the window, but in on-tap licensing, firms can apply at any time without having to wait for the banking regulator to open a window. So, this on-tap licensing guidelines were released by the Reserve Bank of India for universal banks, and you may ask a pertinent question: what is the difference between universal banks and differentiated banks? Universal banks can undertake any type of operation like granting a loan from 1000 rupees to 1000 crores. They can be into wealth management services. They can accept deposits up to any extent, and they can sell insurance policies under bank assurance. So, they can be into any type of activity including investment banking. So, universal banks are the banks which can undertake many operations without any hurdles. They can be into any type of a banking operation. So, the on-tap licensing guidelines were released by the Reserve Bank of India, and at the same time, please don't forget, there is another category of differentiated banks or NIC banks. Recently, Reserve Bank of India gave in principle approval for 11 payment banks and 10 small finance banks. These come into the category of differentiated banks or NIC banks. That means they can undertake only specified category of activities, not all the activities, whereas universal banks can undertake all types of activities. And you may ask a pertinent question: examples of universal banks. Examples are ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, State Bank of India, Vijaya Bank, Canara Bank, Bank of Baroda. These are all examples of universal banks. And as per the guidelines released by Reserve Bank of India, 3-4 important aspects are there. One is the minimum capital is rupees 500 crores, and industrial houses, big industrial houses which are not into financial sector operations are not allowed to open universal banks, and these large industrial houses can take only 10% stake in banks, and basically ring fencing the banking system from large industrial houses is the main theme of this universal banking guidelines. Ring fencing the banking system, that means protecting the banking system from big industrial houses, is the main theme of this licensing policy of Reserve Bank of India. Friends, let us look at the first one. Resident individuals with 10 years experience in banking and finance, as well as business groups with 10 years track record, can promote universal banks. Here, resident individuals, that means the persons who are residents in this country with 10 years experience in banking and finance, as well as business groups with 10 years of track record, can promote. If you look at the second one, big business groups with more than rupees 5,000 crores in total assets, they are also eligible, but there is a stringent condition. That means to apply for license, their income from non-financial businesses should not account for 40% or more. That means for the big industrial houses where the non-financial businesses income is 40% or more are not eligible. So, the essence of these guidelines is big industrial houses like Aditya Birla Group, Tata Group, Reliance Industries Limited, and at the same time groups like Bajaj Finserv, Mahindra Finance, they may not be eligible to apply for universal banks. because big industrial houses are not allowed, and if at all big industrial houses are allowed, their income from non-financial businesses should not account for 40% or more. That means non-financial business should be less than 40%. And financial business should be more than 60%. And these industrial groups like Aditya Birla Group, Tata, Reliance, they may not be able to comply this guideline. And other important aspect is the Reserve Bank of India said no to big business groups so as to protect the banking industry from big industrial houses. But the other important aspect is resident individuals as well as small business groups, whether they have deep pockets to penetrate the operations across the country. This is the $1,000,000 question, which is very difficult to answer at this stage. Then another important aspect is large industrial houses can invest in banks only up to 10%. At the same time, non-banking financial companies that are controlled by residents and have a successful track record of 10 years are eligible to apply, and the minimum capital, as I have already told you, it is rupees 500 crores and should list in the stock exchanges within 6 years of commencing operations. The bank should open minimum 25% of its branches at unbanked rural areas. Unbanked rural areas are the areas up to the population of 9,999. Then capital adequacy ratio will be 13% during the first 3 years. Here I would like to tell you the present guidelines of capital adequacy ratio for the existing universal banks is 9%. But for these new banks, for the first 3 years, it is kept as 13% so as to act as additional safeguard. Then setting up of a non-operative financial holding company is not mandatory for individuals and standalone promoting entities that do not have other group entities. That means if the banking institution is by individuals or by the groups which do not have any other industrial entity as sister concern, or when the promoting group is not part of big industrial house, then setting up of a non-operative financial holding company is not required. Then for others, non-operative financial holding company is mandatory and 51% stake should be owned by the promoters. Basically, the idea of non-operative financial holding company is basically to ring fence the banking operations from the big industrial houses. Then if at all a non-operative financial holding company is required to be floated, then they should hold at least 40% stake for a lock-in period of 5 years, and gradually it should be brought down to 15% within 15 years. And overall, the essence of the guidelines is a big no to industrial houses. And if at all big industrial houses are eligible, then they have to float non-operative financial holding company so as to ring fence the banking operations from their other business operations. Then what is the procedure? Standing External Advisory Committee or SEAC will be set up to vet the eligible applications. Then this SEAC will send its recommendations to the Internal Screening Committee of Reserve Bank of India, which consists of governor as well as deputy governors. Finally, this Internal Screening Committee or ISC will submit its recommendations to the Committee of Central Board of Reserve Bank of India, and the final decision will be taken by the Central Board of Reserve Bank of India, and the approval will be valid for 18 months. This is all about guidelines for universal banks. Please do join for other capsules. Have a nice day. Thank you.